Welcome to Coaching in Session,
where limits end and growth begins.
Hosted by Michael Rearden.
This is your space to challenge the ordinary,
unlock your potential,
and step boldly into your next chapter.
Your mindset journey continues.
Welcome, Dr. Ellyn McLeod to Coaching in Session. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Michael. Thank you.
Today, we're going to be talking about your work, holistic nutritionist. And of course, on the podcast, we've had many holistic nutritionists and coaches come on. But I always find it to be a breath of fresh air when I speak to someone from a different part of the world or just a different mindset on what nutrition is for an individual or for the world. Because we can look at the snacks at all of the grocery stores, all the processed foods, and we can say, oh, we know better not to do that, but we have a sweet tooth. And so we'll get a cake or an ice cream and we feel so bad about it. And I remember there was a life coach named Tony Robbins. His wife at the time was like, Tony, live a little bit, right? Because he was in that mindset of, I'm only going to eat healthy. I'm only going to do the right things. Just give me kiwis and apples and I'll call it a good day. But there was something else. And I wanted to get into a conversation on this eating habits of people today, how people are living today. And then, of course, we can look at what people can do different to enhance their life. But before we do all that, can you please tell us who you are, what you do, and of course, how you help people?
Okay, well, I specifically work with cancer patients. So my degree is in holistic cancer nutrition.
Mm-hmm.
I have a specialized certification in Gerson therapy. It is a vegan holistic cancer nutrition program. I was trained at Bauman College and at Clayton College, and I very specifically work with whole foods, but I have a lot of background in emotional and psychological work too. So we'll talk about it a little later, but my book is called It Takes More Than Carrot Juice because there's more to thriving in your life than just nutrition. So that may give you a little background. I actually got into nutrition because of my own health crisis. I was diagnosed with a pre-Crohn's disease digestive disorder, and I chose a holistic nutritional path, but it also led me into looking at the emotional blocks to my healing. And then my family all developed a cancer diagnosis, and that's how I specifically started targeting working with cancer patients.
So this question is going to seem super basic, super easy. Michael, you should know this, but if you could, can you describe what is cancer and what it does to the body or what it does in the body?
Sure. So cancer is when a series of cells gets out of control. It's when we have exposed ourselves to too many negative things. You could say they're frequencies. You could say they're toxins. You could say that they're a bombardment of either one of two things. There's either too much of something, like a toxin or alcohol or cigarette smoke, but it also could be because of a deficiency of not getting enough nutrition and almost starving yourself to death because you might be getting calories, but you might not be getting the vitamins and minerals that you need. So cancer is when a series of cells start to multiply, and it's based on the mitochondria inside the cell, and that's the energy producing part of the cell. It's when it no longer is able to take in the nutrients through the receptor sites. And so it starts to try to survive, help the body survive by duplicating cells. They're just the wrong ones. So what we try to do is give the body what it needs so that it can now lay all of that out of control mitochondrial production aside and stop producing cells that are harmful and start to producing cells that are helpful.
And so I'm just going to make it super simple. Please correct me. Cancer is out of control cells.
Yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yep, the wrong kinds of cells that are trying to survive. The cancer cells think they're helping you. They think they're helping you survive, but they are multiplying so rapidly. And that's why a lot of the chemotherapies are targeted towards fast growing cells because cancer cells multiply very quickly. That's why you lose your hair because they're also fast growing cells. So they're producing faster than the healthy cells can produce themselves.
Okay. So when we're starting to look at the food for these cells, is it something that they just naturally have access to? So I've read a book, I forget the name of it right now. I can look in a moment. Basically, where they were saying like the foods that they were eating was helping them cure cancer, and it's amazing how we look at all of the regular or common means of remedying cancer, the chemotherapy and all the radiation, we look at it as, okay, that's the only solution. But then there is an other solution that we don't talk about, but diet, like what we're consuming, what we're putting into our body. Is this a new way of looking at cancer? Is this a new study, or is this has been something that has been around for a long time and many people are just unaware of?
Let's look at it this way. You don't get cancer because you have a deficiency of chemical chemotherapy. You don't get a cancer diagnosis because you have a deficiency of radiation. These are ways in which oncologists are fighting the tumors, and they're hoping that they can kill those tumors before they kill you. You get cancer because you're not getting something that you need. It's usually nutrition. It might be fresh air. It might be fresh water. It might be exercise, but you're not getting something you need. So the cause of cancer isn't addressed through the traditional medical options. That's not going to take care of the cause. That's why people get recurrences, or they think they're in remission and then it comes back, because they're addressing hoping that they've gotten all of the cancer within the margins. But if something escapes, it's not addressing that causal factor. So what we're trying to do holistically is we're trying to give the body everything it needs so it goes into this condition called homeostasis. Homeostasis is the body's ability to heal itself. And the body has everything it needs if you give it everything that's a God-given natural nutrition, water, and I'll have to tell you, stress is a huge cause of cancer. So you really have to calm your nervous system down. You really have to promote your immune system. And you could have just as much toxicity with the stress in your life as you do with any foreign chemicals in your life.
Well, I know many people today are not deficient in stress, but they could be deficient in many of the other things like nutrition, getting fresh air, having clean water, things along those lines. Because when we just look at the lifestyle of many people today, it's very processed, where we get things like fast foods and things along those lines. And I just wonder what would happen if the world shifted from a more whole foods nutrition diet than this processed diet. Of course, there will be a lot of manufacturers like Kraft macaroni and stuff like that would go out of business, but the world itself would do better. And so just knowing this aspect of, we know whole foods and good foods are needed for the body. And of course, we look at the ease and the convenience of the processed foods. There's a dilemma now. It's like, we can choose easy now, hard later, or hard now, meaning we have to like get the food and cook the food or prepare the food and just adjust our lifestyle. So this lifestyle change, maybe people wait until they get that C word, the cancer, and they're like, wait, now I have to change my life. Versus today can be an opportunity saying, let me look at my life. Let me see where I'm not showing up or where I'm not eating well. And I know a lot of people right now, they're saying, well, Michael, I'm just going to go buy a multivitamin and I'm going to fix that. Yes, you can do that. That's one of the things you can do. But also diet plays a big role in our health and our longevity. And I would love your input on, why are people moving away from the whole food diet and going more into the convenience of fast foods and meal preps?
You just answered your own question. It's convenient, right? It's very convenient to just pick a processed food off the shelf. And you ask the question, what if, right? What if you had a healthy diet and you were raised on a healthy diet? Now, there's a lot of other factors that go into it, so I won't just specifically blame nutrition. However, one of the programs that I work with closely and the recommendations that I make for the cookbook, Nourishing Traditions, comes from the Weston Price Foundation. And Dr. Weston Price was a dentist who noticed that many of the patients that he was seeing, if they came from a third world country that hadn't been touched by Western foods, had a much healthier dentition. They had no need for orthodontia. They had no need for cavity filling. And so this was back in the 1920s, when you could go to these countries and find civilizations that hadn't been eating processed convenience foods. And so he and his wife took a different trip every year for 11 years. And they went to these countries and they wanted to see, what are these people eating? And they found out not only did they have great teeth, but they didn't have cancer and have heart disease, and they didn't have diabetes in any of these 11 communities. And yet the Eskimos ate very differently than the Tahitians, and the Africans ate very differently than the Swiss. And the New Hebrides Islanders ate very differently than those who were living in the Indonesian area. So how was this possible? Well, they found out that it was certainly because of the lack of being exposed to processed sugars and processed flours. So if we were to eliminate one thing from our diet, that's what I would say is the first thing you should do, is that if you're looking at it from a dietary component, then that's what you would eliminate first. The pastries, the cakes, the pies, the cookies, all of the sugary things, the ice creams, right? This is foreign to the body, and it's a relatively recent thing to have as much bombardment as we have with those foods. So those would be the first things to go.
What would be the cost difference in eating healthy than to eat the poor quality foods? And also maybe the long-term the long-term ramifications if we got maybe a health diagnosis that would raise our health bills, et cetera, which would be cheaper in the long run.
And you mentioned a really good point. I actually did in my book, It Takes More Than Carrot Juice, I actually outlined a field trip I took with some of my high school students where we went to a grocery store and we gave them lists of foods. We gave them a list of processed foods, and then we tried to find an equivalent of the healthy foods that were primarily fresh fruits, vegetables, and meats and whole grains. And they went in with the Safeway was very accommodating, and they let us go through and tallied it all up for us. And then they eliminated, and we had to go put things back on the shelves. But what they found was that it wasn't that different. It was less than a 10th difference for a family of four meals for a family of four. So when you look at what the healthcare costs when you're eating with the pizzas and the cookies and the macaroni and cheese and the ice creams, and you look at and the Coca-Cola, that was the most expensive thing of all, actually, was the soft drinks. So when you look at what the health indicators are from eating those foods, your medical bills are going to be way more than that. So that you make a very good point. It's really for the very small rise in costs of more whole foods, the benefits to your health and not having to come out of pocket so much for not only health insurance premiums, but things because we all know that health insurance isn't free. Not only do we pay for it every month, but you have a huge deductible now. Mine, I think, is something like $10,000 deductible, and that's an annual deductible. So it's a very expensive proposition.
Yeah. Today I was at the grocery store and I was looking at some raspberries because I was buying fruit for my kids because they love fruit. So I had got strawberries, blackberries, and I was like, we haven't got raspberries in a while. So I looked over at the raspberries. Raspberries were like $7.37 for just the regular ones, the non-organic ones. And then I said, okay, how much are the organic ones? It was $7.32. So it's a 5-cent reduction in the raspberries. I was like, well, I guess I would rather get the organic ones than to get the regular ones because it's 5 cents cheaper. But if you look at the ounces or the container, the organic ones were smaller. So you got less, but of course you paid less too. Now, I just look at how we look at life from our stages, right? From kids to teenagers to adults, right? When we're young, we have a higher tolerance, for lack of better words, to eat poorly. And our body can compensate for all of the negativity that we do to it. So if you're in high school, like for example, in high school, we didn't have a lot of money. So we would get French fries for $1.50. I got $20 every single week. And this is before I started working at 16. So like from 14, 15, I was eating French fries. And it's so funny because I gained a bunch of weight and had to lose it. So I was eating French fries, $1.50, because it's all I can essentially afford at lunchtime. And people would just get a bag of Doritos or something along those lines. So we're eating very poorly. And you just look at everyone was relatively thin. Versus today, if you had a order of French fries or a bag of Doritos, you're gaining on the weight. And I want to talk about the difference between a young body versus a body that has been more matured.
I'm probably a perfect example of that. So I grew up at a generation where everything, all of these processed foods, to get them to you, it was easier to bring them to your door. I had the milkman. I had the bread, the hostess bread man. The ice cream man came around, and you knew when they were there. They have a little ding-a-ling on their bell. So I ate very poorly as a child and suffered no health issues. I was a relatively healthy kid. I was able to do everything I needed to do. But when I was 28 years old, I was hit with an intestinal IBS kind of condition that when I went in for a diagnosis, the gastroenterologist told me it was pre-Crohn's disease. And I thought to myself, how could that possibly be? Crohn's disease is a very high inflammation of the gut, of both the small and large intestine. And it makes you very intolerant of food. It's just a highly inflammatory condition, very uncomfortable, makes you miserable. And it took 28 years for my body to catch up and be diagnosed. But I was lucky enough to run into a nutritionist. That's why I was kind of inspired to do what I do now. And she was helpful in turning things around. She opened my refrigerator and she says, "Oh my God, honey, you got to get rid of this and you got to get rid of that. And I'm taking you to the farmer's market." So I was fortunate to find somebody who knew how to eat and taught me how.
That's very important because I know sometimes we spend money on things and we're like, well, we don't want to just throw it out because it costs us money. And we're like, okay, let's try to conserve. And people do a poor job at that because they'll have ice cream in the freezer or something. And they said they won't touch it, but they touch it every evening. So they're just doing all the wrong things. And I find it very interesting how our world is ever changing, right? It's like the convenience aspect is still there. Like as you were able to get your breads and your milks to the door, now we can get whole groceries delivered to our house from DoorDash or Uber Eats or whatever. So we can get the bad foods without even leaving our house. And the ice cream man, we have one ice cream man that comes around. It's actually an ice cream lady. She comes around and she sells ice cream. And I just hope my kids never hear that bell. And it's so funny because the other day she came around and my son was like, "What's that noise?" I was like, "Nothing." It's just like, close your ears. And I wanted to talk about this idea of how people, they start to realize, and there's a mindset trend. I'm not sure if you're too familiar with it, where people are starting to look at their age and seeing the differences of what they are today than what they were when they were younger. So if they would play sports or if they would go running or jogging or whatever, they would realize that their body is not the same anymore. And it's a mindset trend that's happening that I don't even think people are aware about. And what is happening is that people are starting to get this idea of maybe I should be a little bit more healthy. So they'll eat a salad along with their cheeseburger or something like that. Like they do the craziest things. And your title of the book, right? It takes more than carrot juice. It's this idea also of people are saying, well, I'll just go on a juice cleanse for a little bit. And I just think about how many people have gone on a diet for 30 days, but had a whole year of 330 days of just eating bad, right? So it's just like we have more bad days than good days. And they hope that maybe if I just eat something good today, or if I do something good today, it's going to change my life. And of course, yeah, sure, we create the discipline and the mindset, but this idea of a quick fix, is there a quick fix that someone can partake in? Or is there, this idea of drinking, carrot juice for the rest of my life is going to fix everything?
Definitely not. However, I will tell you this. I come from a very different perspective than most nutritionists. I don't think there's anything wrong with the occasional indulgence in Haagen-Dazs. I don't think there's anything wrong with taking your family to pizza every once in a while. That's not the issue here. I think with our particular society, especially the American society, everything is so convenient. Everything comes so quick. Everything is offered to us on a silver platter, including the medications and pharmaceuticals that suppress the symptoms that are telling you there's something wrong. So what I see is really wrong with our society isn't just the foods we eat. is that when we do start getting symptoms, that we feel like we're just going to pop a pill and that's going to solve it for us. And instead, what ends up happening is you suppress the very symptom that's giving you the red light warning. It's telling you, slow down, buddy. Maybe you're moving too fast. Maybe your nervous system is out of control. Maybe your marriage needs to have some work. Maybe the stress around your relationship is too much for you. It may not just be your food. And yet, I've got anxiety. I'm gonna pop in a pill. This is the issue. So this is what I'm saying in the book. It's stories of 20 different clients of mine and the wake up calls that they had when cancer came knocking at their door. And there's a big difference between a client that comes to me because they want to lose some weight because they've got a wedding event to go to this summer and they want to fit in this great looking dress. And the cancer patient that comes and says, the oncologist just told me there's nothing more he can do. And he gave me a 6-month timeline. That's a big difference in motivation. So for those who think that diet is going to cure anything, I would say there's a much deeper problem that we have here in our society. And I think our healthcare system, especially our health insurance system, is one of those problems because many of these holistic therapies aren't covered by your insurance. These are things you have to pay out of pocket. So most people will opt for the pharmaceutical because it's covered. And I'm saying, hey, it might be something deeper than that. And we could talk about that. My book is actually a lot about mindset and what those changes in mindset are that have to get to the point where you make the changes. Because a weight loss client is a lot less motivated than a cancer client.
Yes. No, I think that would be also something that we could talk about because the motivation is very much necessary for someone to take that initiative, that action. And I talk about this quite a bit in the podcast where people don't wait until everything is going well in their life to check in. They wait until everything is broken, right? If something goes wrong in your car, they'll turn up the volume, they'll put a sticker over the check engine light or something like a happy face, and they just hope everything goes their way until they're on the side of the road. And you don't want to be on the side of the road in Texas, right? So like right now in the summer, it's like 100, 101. Yeah. It's not like in Arizona where you are like 89, very nice. So it's like we have to understand that we can wait until everything breaks down, or we can say, I don't want to be on the side of the road and have to wait for AAA or wait for Dr. Ellyn to come and help me out or have a doctor to give me 6 months left to live. What can I do that's going to get me to take action today? And again, that's that mindset conversation. What can we do to get people to say, now's the time, not later when you get a bad doctor's note?
I can tell you this, I think that we normalize a lot of things that should be warning signs. I think when we get a cold or we start getting consistent colds or flus, or when we have a headache, or when our skin has lesions on it, or we get psoriasis, or we get a stomach ache and we think we've got indigestion or acid reflux. We normalize these things. We think everybody has it. I think even depression has been normalized because I went to a women's support group and all of these women there were about 12 people in there. Every single one of them was on an antidepressant. Now that's a problem. That percentage rate and you're taking an antidepressant. So I think that there is much smaller symptoms that people should be aware of. If those things are popping up in your life, it might be a pretty strong indicator that you can start turning things around now, because there's cold diseases and hot diseases. And those hot diseases are the ones that show up first. Those are the ones like you're sneezing, you're coughing, you get an ear infection, you've got a stomach ache, you've got diarrhea, you've got these things that are these hot diseases that show their symptoms very quickly. And as soon as you suppress those and start taking medications and antacids and aspirin and all of these things to suppress those symptoms, you drive them deeper. Now they're a cold disease. And that's how we get things like Parkinson's disease and ALS and cancer and type 2 diabetes. We're driving all of these symptoms deep into our system and not listening to what they're trying to say. So one of those indicators of someone who is very successful at turning their health around is someone who listens to those diseases as a teacher. If you see those things as a teacher, you're way ahead of the game. You don't have to see them as an inconvenience. You could see them as, oh, here's a lesson. Maybe I ought to take a look at this. Why have I got these continual headaches? This is a problem. So I would say that's the perspective that I'm taking, is that some of these things, these mindsets, is just waking up to what some of these little symptoms are. But one of the most important mindsets is look at this as a teacher. Look at your symptoms as a teacher. And if you can see that, you can tame the dragon instead of kill it.
I was looking at degrees today, like health degrees, and I was looking at psych degrees, is my area. And one of the things I was looking at was not just like the cost of the degrees, but the cost of what doctors can charge when they are regulated by health insurances. So a doctor that could well be charging $500 an hour can't, because they're regulated by the insurances. So what I started to think about during that little research moment was, are these doctors more about just managing the symptoms and keeping people coming versus healing them and saying, I don't have to see them anymore because they're healed or cured? And I just thought, why would someone who's limited in their money want people to go away? So it's like the health system is maybe broken or it needs some adjustment, or there needs to be some altercations where, or, this idea of like these doctors should be not just giving people medication to just fix the symptoms. It's like, hey, we need to do this to fix the problem. Because we look at antidepressants, 67%, I believe, increased from the year before. So that's a big jump. Now, I can understand 20, maybe 30%, right? But it's well above double of that. So it's just like, we are being happy with the pills. Like, hey, you get a pill, you get a pill. I don't know what the health industry is doing or what they think they are. Maybe they think they are Oprah. Oprah was like, you get a car, you get a car. And they're just like, you get medication, you get medication. And it's even translating into children today, especially young boys. Young boys, they're rambunctious, they're doing this, and their diet is poor. We know their diet is poor. They're eating ice creams and sodas and Sour Patch Kids, and they're eating all of this poor foods, and they're saying, oh, they have ADHD, they have all of these problems. Let's give them medication. And I'm just looking at them, and I'm just looking at the families, and I'm just saying, don't you see the real problem? And I just start to think, what would happen if we started to change the conversation? We started to change possibly how we inform parents or the education system. We started them young, very similar to how you did with your high school students, taking them to the store to say, hey, let's figure out how much it costs to eat well. It's only a $10 difference, right? But that's high school, right? They already had 14 years of harm possibly. And it took that long for them to say, well, let me start to get in there. Like, can't we bring them in kindergarten and first grade and say, let's start there?
Let's start with the beginning of your question, which is about how the medical industry views a patient. So you have to look at, and I don't fault the doctors. I think the way they're educated in medical schools, which are primarily funded by pharmaceutical companies, is that they are learning how to manage symptoms with chemicals. A doctor gets less than 2 weeks of nutrition classes in his entire medical school experience. So a doctor gets less than that of anything like homeopathics, chiropractic, unless you go to chiropractic school, acupuncture, unless you go to acupuncture school. I mean, less than any of those individual practitioners. So if you're being trained that the only way, and the way they do it, which I think is really interesting, the way they do it is that they present clinical trials or clinical studies showing that this is an effective drug. But the thing most people don't realize is that many of these drugs, even if they initially can help with symptoms, during the long term, not only does it end up wearing off, but then there's symptoms associated with those first pharmaceuticals. So now you prescribe another pharmaceutical to take care of the headache that the first one caused. And then You start to prescribe another medication to take care of the indigestion that the second one caused. And then you prescribe another medication to take care of the diarrhea so it goes on and on and on. I have a client right now that just came in 14 different medications, each one trying to address the symptoms of the previous. So if that's the only tool you have in your toolbox, is that you have pharmaceuticals, that's all the doctors have to give. That's it. So you must see the advertisements when at the bottom of sometimes they actually even say it, but at the bottom of the advertisement, they say, this could cause cancer. This could cause liver disease. This could cause death. I mean, some of them even say that this could cause spontaneous death. And so you realize there's symptoms that go along with this. So naturopathic or holistic medicine is a completely different framework. We're not working from the framework of suppress the symptom. We're looking at what is the original cause of this condition, symptom, or discomfort. How did you get there? So our appointments are typically much longer than a 15-minute doctor appointment. If that's what your symptoms are, great. I'm going to put that into AI. All right, this is the med. There you go. Ours are a little bit more extensive. We want to get to know the patient. What's your lifestyle like? What's your job like? What are some of your favorite foods? What are some of the least favorite foods? I even ask questions of what was your childhood message around food, right? I've got a whole segment on changing the mindset of what your childhood perception was of what food was for you. Were you a child in which you were the hungry bear? And so you were doing everything you possibly could feed yourself because you wanted to protect yourself from something outside of yourself? Were you the perfectionistic swan? Were you the one that had the mother that said, eat everything on your plate? Oh, you've got a couple of other little macaroni pieces there. You got to eat those. So there's various mindsets that get cemented into your psyche as your behaviors as a child, right? So, but there's those particular mindsets end up not only determining how you look at food, but how you look at life. Because that perfectionistic swan also ends up becoming kind of that OCD person at your workplace that's so particular and picky about the way things are done, right? And so there's where that anxiety comes from. Or that hungry bear ends up becoming someone who is a little aggressive with people because he's always trying to, protect himself like a little warrior or a grizzly. So it ends up causing other issues in your life too. So I look at this differently. It's not the doctor's fault that they're not looking at the cause. This is their education. And Western med has great diagnostics. I mean, the things you can see on a CT scan or a PET scan or through blood tests, really is amazing. But then use your own intuition and start looking at being a full participant in your own healing. Take responsibility for yourself. Ask the tough questions. That's another one of my mindset list, in my book too, is become responsible for your own healing. Be an active participant. Don't believe everything anyone tells you, including your holistic nutritionist. Look for all of the options. Read, use the internet. We have an amazing tool. The internet, right now in ChatGPT, you could put all your symptoms in, and it's going to give you 2 or 3 options that you could come up with yourself before you ever even walk into that doctor's office. Then you have a little toolkit of being able to be a lot more proactive and participate in this experience. So I don't think it's the doctor's fault. I think it's our laziness. It's our lack of critical thinking.
Yeah. I think critical thinking is slowly starting to depreciate in our world today. We can see it with our kids. We can see it in young adults, and we can even see it in the adults of our world today. And of course, we don't necessarily see the repercussions of our actions today. We fail to look at mentors or people who have walked before us and see their problems and say, well, I don't want that life. And this is all just a mindset. For example, my father, he was an alcoholic, and it took a stroke for him to stop drinking. But it didn't take me to have a stroke for me to say drinking is bad, right? I can see that. And some people, they can see it, right? But then they might have the wrong friend groups or peer groups or along those lines, and they're just doing the wrong things. And so I always say you have to find people that want to be there and support you, because not everyone can do life by themselves. Right? Some people have a really hard time of just saying, okay, I'm going to do everything and I'm going to be this lone warrior and I'm just going to figure it out for myself. Sometimes people need some help. And I remember there's times, many times in my life where I needed support, where I needed help, where I needed guidance. I didn't know all the answers. And so this is where I decided, like, what can I do in life? And this is where I wanted to become a coach, because there was areas of my life where if I had someone like me, I would have been in a better situation or a better scenario. But that's not just to say about mindset. This is to also say about health and nutrition, trainers at the gym, etc. To have people that want to see you do well, to be better than what you are. I mean, our world today is just so competitive, where we just think everyone's our enemy or everyone is in competition with somebody. So we look at our phones and we see a movie star. We go, oh, I want to be better than them. I want to be a better NBA player or a basketball player, whatever it be. We are looking at this as a competition versus let's figure out how we can work as a group or a society, or as just, develop the culture where it's like we are helping everyone be better than what they are. And the work that you do is literally that. You have a group that you meet every Sunday, helping people through that process. And what I would love for you to do is if you could tell us how we can find you, if people are interested in working with you, if they want to partake in that group on Sunday, if they wanted to get your book to learn more about the stories that you have, lived with your clients. All of this is going to be wisdoms and knowledges that people can learn from rather than live in later on.
I'm a big believer that support is important. I think you've really hit on the key of success. And the reason support groups are such a big part of my practice is that that's when I really see transformation. When people can see themselves in someone else and they stop judging and they start having more compassion for others, then they start having more compassion for themselves. That's why I love support groups. You can see someone, maybe you've been someone who's been complaining about, oh, woe is me, that this terrible situation I've gotten myself into. And then you see somebody there at the support group who's in a much more difficult situation than you. It makes you more compassionate and it makes you a bigger giver instead of a taker. That's why I love them. So I meet every Sunday over here at the United Methodist Church here in Sedona. I do bring my laptop. People can go on my website, which is Sedona Solution, singular, no S at the end, sedonasolution.com. And they can get the code for the Zoom link and they can download it and they can watch right through my laptop that I have right now. And they can listen in if they're from out of the area. And we go through something called the principles of attitudinal healing. We go through a different principle every week on how you can change your mindset, how you can change your attitude so that you can become more compliant on doing the things that are the most healthy for you. Not everybody is the same. Some people are going through chemo there. Some people have just gotten out of surgery. Some people are doing it completely holistically. So there's a lot of different options that people have, and they learn to be less judgmental about what people are doing and look more inside as to how am I thinking? How can I change my thinking? Because you can't fix these things. You can't fix them. They're obstacles in the path to your wholeness and who you already are. So what we try to encourage is you already are whole the way God intended you to be. You already have all the ingredients to being healed. You've just put a couple things in your path that can be easily removed if we can shine the light on it. And that's what we do in the support group. So we meet 5 p.m. on Sundays at United Methodist. And as I mentioned, you just go right onto our website right there. If you need a consultation, and I give free half-hour consultations to people individually. So they can go on and sign up through Calendly and get a free half-hour consultation and chat with me about their situation. I may not be the coach for them, right? I might have a great recommendation of somebody else who would be a better fit. So that's why I like to spend about a half hour with people and really help them navigate their own choices because they're the ones in the driver's seat. I'm not going to tell them what they can and cannot do. But if they want to use nutrition, I'm happy to work with them. If they'd rather go a different route and they've heard about some therapy down in Ecuador, I'm happy to send them there.
I love it. I'm definitely not the coach for a lot of people. I always say that myself
Yeah.
because
Exactly.
you just have to find the right spice in your life, and everyone's going to require different spice. I remember when I got married, I didn't like spicy food, and my wife likes spicy food. And so she cooks a little bit with spicy food. So I had to acclimate to the spicy foods. And now when my brother comes to eat, because we grew up Puerto Rican household, we don't use much spice, not like Mexican, where he would come down to eat the same level of spice that I would be eating. And I go, it's not even spicy. And he was like, it's so spicy, I can't even eat it. So I was like, okay, well, I guess I acclimated to the spice, or I acclimated to my marriage. So it's going to be, something that worked out for me. And I just love this idea of how when it comes to like life, right? Like everyone's going to have their own individual situation, right? Like in the group, as you were saying, some people are dealing with certain things. And it's hard for me to just target everybody saying, all right, everyone, this is what you need to do. You need to drink this, you need to eat this, and then you're going to be good, right? Or you need to think this way, and all of a sudden your life is going to change. Because we don't know what everyone is going through right now. Someone can be going through a loss right now. Someone could be having, a new doctor's note come into their life and they don't know how to deal with it. And all of this is going to lead to them trying to figure out what is the solution. And whether your website has an S on it or no S on it, doesn't matter. The links are right down below. So you don't have to worry about any spelling, people. You can just go down, click the link, learn more about how Dr. Ellyn can help you, learn more about her book, learn more about her Sunday evenings workshops, Arizona time. Okay. So it's going to be 5 p.m. Arizona time. So wherever you are in the world, you can always set your alarm for that. And then you can always just make sure you show up. And that could be the inception. That could be the starting point for you, where you just learn to be around people who are trying to become better, that are trying to enhance themselves. And then you can see the possibilities. And this is where the mind shines. If we can see that something is possible, then we are more likely to do it as well. So learn about the possibilities, learn about the solutions. If you need help, if you need support, I believe Dr. Ellyn is going to be a wonderful asset in your corner. Dr. Ellyn, thank you so much for coming on today, talking about your work, talking about your book, and talking about the stories of how you help so many people.
Thank you, Michael. Good questions. I really enjoyed it. I really appreciate all of your expertise.